Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised.
Like using fertility awareness as like a method doesn't make sense without the theology. Like it just seems ridiculously hard. Like it's like, why would I do that? Why would I abstain? Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. Before we get started with today's episode, I do want to mention that this episode was recorded quite a while ago. I am so excited to finally be able to share this episode with Mary Kate with all of you. It's a really great conversation. There is an extra guest in this episode. Baby Oliver was sitting on my lap for this episode. So if you hear some extra little coos and noises, that's just Oliver giving his opinion about the topic we're discussing. All right. We are here with Mary Kate Knorr. I am so excited to have you here, Mary Kate. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Could you just start by giving us a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll jump into our topic for today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mary Kate, as you said, and I, in the last year, founded an organization called Femine Vero. And the founding of this organization for me really came from experiences that I've had inside of the pro-life movement. I worked first in politics and then in the pro-life movement for a few years. And I was just always discouraged when people would say, don't talk about religion when you talk about the abortion issue. Like, don't bring up religion. That's totally neither here nor there. We have to remove religion from the conversation, because I always felt like that's actually why we care. Like, if God doesn't exist and if Jesus isn't real, why does the human person even really matter?
What a good point. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so for me, I just, in learning about, talking to women, being in the pro-life movement and learning about my own cycle and how our hormones work and how miraculous the reproductive system really is.
Right.
And conception. Yeah, absolutely. There were things I had never heard before until I was working at a pro-life organization and I started learning about charting for the first time. And I just felt like women need to know this, but they also need to know that there's a theological piece here, like theology of the body and charting go hand in hand, because the biology, exactly, like the biology is what informs the faith piece and vice versa. They inform one another. So that's the mission of Femine Vero, is really just to educate women on the connections between the two, to inform them on, your biology and the theology of what we believe. They actually are complementary. They actually do go hand in hand. And what the church teaches actually makes sense.
I feel like I often say, like, using fertility awareness as like a method doesn't make sense without the theology. Like, it just seems ridiculously hard. Like, it's like, why would I do that? Why would I abstain?
It's
like
100%.
When you actually insert the theology and you really understand like the true purpose of marital intimacy, then it makes sense that you can't separate the unitive and procreative parts, and that you do have to abstain if you're trying to avoid a pregnancy. Like those connections come together. Yeah. And without it, it's just like, why would I even do that?
Right. 100%. Absolutely. And I think on the flip side of that too, that's also why the contraception conversation starts to make so much more sense when we understand the theology, because we're able to understand why sex should be, open to new life and fully receptive and fully a gift and all of those things. So I totally agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Awesome. So today we're going to just kind of discuss a little bit about how reproductive healthcare is connected to our faith. And so I highly suggest everyone listening to check out, I feel like I pronounce it wrong. Femine Vero, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Femine Vero. Okay. Yeah. Check it out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. But yeah, so that's kind of our discussion topic for today. So to get us started, let's just ask that big question. How is reproductive healthcare connected to our faith?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's so interesting because just a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with a girl I know who is not religious and not pro-life. And we were talking about abortion. And I wasn't saying anything about religion. I was talking exclusively about the science, and I was talking exclusively about, like, it's just better for the woman, and using anecdotal examples with her. And she just kept saying to me, this is not science. This is your religious belief. And it was like literally my whole life happening in front of my face, that I'm just like, on the one hand, I stepped away from the conversation, and I thought to myself, like, I just did exactly what I tell people not to do, which is I tried to run from the religious piece of this conversation. Because the world has told me that won't work. You won't convince anyone that abortion is wrong by talking about Jesus Christ. And I have just been so convicted in the last few years that it really is a Jesus question. Like, the abortion issue really is a Jesus question. If Jesus Christ is a real human person, then the baby inside the womb matters and has inherent value, and we have to protect that vulnerable little life. If Jesus Christ is not a real person, and if God does not exist, and if there is no inherent value in us as human beings who have souls and who were made in the image and likeness of God, if none of that is true, then who cares if you eliminate your pregnancy, before you've had the child? Like, it's and we're just like another animal, basically. So I would say the connection between the reproductive system and and our faith is actually very important to this conversation. It's very, very important, because our faith helps inform what we know is true about the biology, which is, this is a miracle. Like, the stars have to align for conception to occur in so many ways, not just in like the sperm has to meet the egg. Like, there are so many other things that have to happen for the woman's body to carry this baby to full term and deliver this child. And I mean, you have children. And so to me, it makes sense. And I also think it's such a natural evangelization opportunity, because women are experiencing their reproductive systems every single day inside of their bodies. Like, we have other organs that do their job without us really knowing, or like we breathe without thinking about it,
Right.
We have our periods and, the various things going on in our bodies. We are in some shape or form aware of our reproductive systems, at least for a few days of the month every year. So we are experiencing our reproductive systems in a very tangible way. And so to draw the connection back to God, and to use that, something that women are experiencing, as a means of opening up that conversation about what God's plan was for us as women, I think that makes it, we're able to speak to women about their experience as women in a way that really transcends what the secular culture can say about us. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to just hit back on the point that you said earlier about like you feeling very convicted to not take God out of this conversation. Like, and yeah, I just want to honor that, because I completely agree. Like, and that's how I sit in my ministry as well, is just like, when we are talking about these things, when we're talking about natural family planning, when we're talking about our fertility cycle that we have, like, God is a part of that, because God designed it, and using natural family planning in our marriages is working in tandem with God. It's following, what he has given us to plan our families. He has given us this reproductive cycle. He's given us these signs that we can actually see and track. And we can do way more than just plan our families with that information, right? We can learn a lot about our health. And like, thank you, Lord, that you gave us these things that we can track. And like, I've met countless women that are like, oh, I'm so glad I started charting, because I found out that I had XYZ and I was able to get it treated. And now I have a couple of babies, and, and that, whatever that was that they had, if they had endometriosis, that if they had PCOS, that could have led to infertility farther down the line, but they started charting and they found out about it. Anyway, I got a little off on a tangent there.
Well, no, it's, I could not agree more. And I feel like one of the things that is so beautiful about natural family planning, and so I'm engaged, I'm not married yet. So I'm just celibate because I'm, not a married person, but, one of the beautiful things that in stories and conversations I've had with women who are married and have, practiced NFP or just been 100% open to life and, kind of the different seasons that you have in marriage with that.
Right.
Some of the stories I've heard from women, I think are just such a testament to how our sexuality is so inherently tied to our soul and to our spiritual experience as human beings. A friend of mine, Regina Donahue, I'm sure you remember this, a few months back, there was kind of an explosion of NFP talk on Instagram.
Oh, yes. Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah.
We won't name any names here.
We won't. And there was kind of an explosion of conversation at this time about NFP and what does that look like in marriage and what are, quote unquote, justifiable reasons or,
Right.
whatever for NFP and when should that be practiced, etc. And my friend Regina said something that I thought was so wise. She said, practicing NFP is to a certain extent inherently purifying because you're not just discerning and then saying, okay, for a year, we're going to practice NFP. Like you have to rediscern and either recommit yourself or decide not to practice NFP every month because you're going through that season of fertility every single month, those days that you're fertile. And her comment was, there is like a denial of self that occurs in those days that you choose this, what you as a couple may discern is a greater good, choosing not to conceive or choosing not to have sex, I guess those days. And I believe there's a spiritual experience that actually takes place there. And, my fiance and I have been having a lot of conversations about chastity recently. We're about 7 months out from our wedding. So we're kind of at a point that intimacy, I think, would be very natural for us because that's where we're at. The commitment, the sacrament hasn't occurred, but the commitment is there.
Right.
So chastity takes on a whole new challenge because we have the intention of becoming married. And we know that, unless something changes for one of us in the next 7 months, that will be the rest of our lives. And so there is a greater temptation to that act, but also, the conversations that we've had, chastity really is the cross, it's picking up that cross and carrying it. And I think in NFP, it's just a really beautiful example of how that's lived out. And I think that the Lord uses that in us to, like I said, it's a denial of self. So
right.
It's so
it's not easy to abstain.
Oh yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
Personally being in a period of postpartum time where I'm at cycle 0 and like, it would not be healthy for me to get pregnant right now. It's really, really hard. But I love what you said there. And what your friend kind of was speaking to is just this, it truly is a denial of self. And, I think sometimes people are like, oh, you can use NFP selfishly. And it's like, well, okay, sure. You might have not a great intention for trying to avoid, but it's so selfless to abstain that like, if you really were like that selfish, you probably wouldn't end up abstaining. Like,
yeah, right. Exactly.
And so, I don't know. DM me if you have a different opinion about this, but like using NFP to avoid a pregnancy, like almost has this natural, like self-check in it is like, oh, are you truly trying to avoid for a good reason? Cause like, if you're not, probably just going to end up pregnant.
Exactly. Correct. And that's kind of the thing is like, it's a lot easier, I think, to say no to sex with your spouse in the moment of the month that you want it the most, when you have a really, really good reason.
Right.
Like people with chronic illness or illness, severe illness in general. I know a woman who has chronic Lyme disease, and there are seasons that she's like, that's very, she's, has flares. And that's an example of like a season that I think it becomes a lot easier to choose abstinence because that pregnancy could be dangerous for her. But on the flip side of that, like you're newly married and you just want to be a married couple for a year and you don't want to get pregnant and have kids right away, God might have other plans for you.
Right. Well,
and that might happen naturally.
There's kind of a funny joke within instructors is it's like, if you see a client kind of starting to cut corners, it's like, that's when, they're already kind of okay with, with having a baby. Cause it's like, oh, well, like, this is like a semi-safe day. And I'm like, honestly, no, the rules are the rules. Like, you're either like 100%. Following the rules for avoiding or you're not following the rules.
100%. Yeah. 100%. That makes total sense to me, and I think like this really does go back to like, I don't believe that you can really truly practice. I mean, let's take NFP as being like a Catholic thing. Let's just forget that for a second. If we had a secular person who wanted to practice quote unquote organic contraception, because that's what I feel like charting is for a lot of women nowadays. It's just like an organic way to not get pregnant when you're,
got to use those buzzwords, right? It's organic.
Exactly. You got to use the buzzwords. So, but I feel like a lot of women are kind of attracted to this now because they're like, I don't have to put false hormones in my body in order to prevent pregnancy. And there's an opportunity for grace there. I mean, I think it was Saint Augustine who said grace builds on nature. And so if we are naturally denying ourselves of something that we desire, there is an opportunity for grace to come into play there. And I think that, like I said, God uses that. So, and again, I think self-denial in general is the cross. That's why fasting is so, pivotal to our spiritual lives. And that's why we fast during Lent. And so you can't get away from it is my point. Like, you can't get away from the spiritual aspect of what's happening when you're choosing not to have sex, which is like the most natural human act.
Right. Well, and particularly during the point in the cycle when the woman is the most fertile,
100%.
That's when it feels the most natural to want to then have sex with your spouse, because like your hormones they're all lined up. They're like, this is the time.
Yeah.
And so it does. It feels very unnatural to abstain. Not that unnatural is a bad thing. Like, that does build grace, and that self-denial is very good. And like having mastery over our innate drives and emotions is really important. I'm totally just quoting Humana Vitae right now. He said it best. I don't need to, I don't need to try to rewrite it. Right.
Why try to,
But like having that mastery, that self-mastery is very important. We talk about that in so many different aspects of our lives, and like in both the religious and the secular world of like having self-mastery in certain things. So it just makes sense to have 100%. Self-mastery in our sexual relationships and our sexuality as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where like that chastity jumps in, and oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Mary Kate, why should we care about the fact that our reproductive health care is related to our faith?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the evangelization piece I mentioned before. My experience in the pro-life movement was, it is not enough to convince people that abortion is wrong. And it's not enough to make abortion illegal, because at the end of the day, like, okay, yes, correct. We are saving lives by doing that. 100%. That's worthwhile. But like, as Christian people, what is our highest calling? One of our highest callings is to evangelize other people and to bring people with us to heaven. And so I just really felt like this is not enough. Like, I don't just want people to know that abortion is wrong. I want people to know that Jesus Christ was a real human person who died on the cross for them. And was the Son of God, and so I had talked to so many women in my last year. I was the executive director of Illinois Right to Life. And I had talked to so many women in that last year who told me that they had like either like a reversion to the faith, or that they actually converted to the Catholic faith through charting and getting to know their reproductive cycle. That it was so clear to me that there is something here. Like, this is touching women in a way that nothing else is reaching them. And it's touching them to such an extent that they're actually coming into, like, they're receiving the sacrament of baptism. They're coming into the Catholic faith and the Christian faith. And I just felt like we need to lean into this. Like we need
Yeah.
there needs to be an organization or a group that is really leaning into that possibility and really inviting women into the truth of how their bodies were made and what God's plan was for that. So that, I would say that's why it matters, because we have such an opportunity in this crazy world that we live in where, you know, women are like demanding abortion on demand, you know, and we're fighting over whether or not it should be legal, and contraceptives are rampant. I mean, I kind of fell down a rabbit hole a couple of weeks ago about like searching data on, there was a chastity speaker I know who told me once that he believes that as many as 75% of middle school girls in public schools are on some form of contraceptive, because we have so many doctors putting girls and women on artificial hormonal birth control for reasons that have nothing to do with contraception.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that, I kind of began to wonder about those numbers, and Guttmacher Institute is kind of like the go-to place to, you know, get data and stats on abortion and contraception. And they don't track how many girls under the age of 15 are on contraceptives, but 15 through 19 or whatever, they say like 85% of them use some form of a contraceptive.
Wow.
So in my mind, I was like, there's no way that number jumps from 0 to 85 when they turn 15. So anyway, I was kind of spiraling about this, trying to kind of this, but my point in mentioning it is that there is a very prominent need for this message right now, because we are losing girls to contraception as young as 11, 12, 13 years old. 11 years old is when most pediatricians start talking about their reproductive cycle. So in my mind, like that's also the age that kids are like potentially in youth group, kind of involved in the faith, leaving the faith. Like there's just so much that happens in that period of time.
Yeah. That's a huge age. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, I just feel like we have to reach these girls. Like we have to do something to reach them and educate them. And then to show them like, look how beautiful God's plan is for you. I gave a talk at a school a couple of years ago about, it was to a group of young girls. They were younger than 14, actually. I don't remember how they might've been like 11, 10 or 11, but I said something in passing to them. It's actually, I didn't even say it. It's something Jason Everett says about how the woman is the crescendo of the creation story. And she is the most beautiful creation on earth. And that's why, you know, when we are like, you know, when we're advertising for cars or liquor, they don't put like dogs on those ads. They put women on those ads because women are beautiful. And I said this, I didn't say it quite that way for these young girls, but I said, you know, I kind of said that, and it was just like a passing comment. And one of the moms reached out to me about a week later, and she was like, I just want to let you know what an impact those words had on my daughter. And she said, my daughter was in the car on the way home, looking out the window. And she said, Mom, did you know that the woman is the most beautiful creature on earth? And she was like, God created me to be the most beautiful creature on earth. I get choked up even thinking about it.
Oh my gosh.
So impacted. And so I think about that. And I think like, we want every little girl to know that and to feel that, you know?
Yes.
And I just feel like charting and understanding your body that's the road. Like that's the path to understanding how amazing and miraculous God made each and every one of us. And so in my mind, that's why we have to care as Catholics. Sorry, I'm like crying all the time.
Oh my gosh, don't apologize. Like I was very moved.
Good. I mean, it's moving these little girls. It's like from the mouths of babes, right? You're like, every woman wants to hear that in her heart. Like God made me the most beautiful creature on earth. So all that is to say, this is why it matters to me. It matters to me because I want every little girl to know and have that in her heart and like carry that with her, that this is how God made me. And I feel like understanding our biology, that's the ticket. Like that's the way. So yeah, that's why it matters in my mind, at least.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just, if you really start drilling down and thinking about it, like when you're charting, you're getting to know yourself better as a woman. You're getting to know how your body works. You're getting to know how it was designed. And if God truly lives within our hearts, then
if you're getting to know yourself better, you're getting to know God better. So it just makes sense that charting has been the path. I too have talked to many women who are like, oh yeah, NFP is the reason I'm Catholic now.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I was secular before, I was some other denomination of Christian. Like when I started charting, I learned so much about myself, how I was designed, how God just like truly designed this beautiful feature of women's bodies. And sure, like it bugs us sometimes. But it really is
a hard pill to swallow, but yeah. Yeah.
Being Catholic doesn't mean, your life's perfect and easy. But yeah, like it is truly beautiful, and it is so miraculous. Like all of those things, like it is so miraculous how the fertility cycle works. Like, how is it that our brain knows to send different hormones? Like, how is our body doing that? We don't actually know. We understand what the hormones are that are going on through the cycle. We understand like the result of those hormones, but like, we don't really understand why it is that our body does that.
Yeah.
And will we ever? Maybe not this
time.
Like, and maybe we're not supposed to. Like,
yeah. And again, this is the part that I get a little bit like the political part of me comes out, because I'm like, you have all these like liberal pro-choice people who say, well, we're the side of science. And it's like, you've clearly not actually looked at the science if you feel that way. Like, right. Science, in my mind, science is so limited that how could you look at science and specifically look at the science of the reproductive system and not agree that there has to be some larger power pushing the button on all of these things? Because holy smokes, it's a miracle. Like there's no reason for all this to work the way it does.
Yeah. So I'm with you. We like have almost 8 billion people on the world, on the earth is very miraculous. Like conception. 100%. And I think anyone who has struggled with infertility will agree that it is truly miraculous when a child is conceived, because sometimes it is very, very hard.
Yeah.
And so it's like, God is willing each and every single person who has been conceived. God willed that person into existence, whether or not it was planned.
Amen.
By the humans,
Amen.
It was planned by God.
Amen.
And that's beautiful and miraculous and like mind blowing.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. Because also if God didn't intend, I have my roommate, has a daughter that she got pregnant unexpectedly about, well, I guess 4 or 5 years ago. And now she has a 4-year-old. And so I actually just moved out this week, but I was living with them for about 6 months. And she is an example I always think of, she obviously wasn't married to the person that she conceived Renly with, but God must have had a plan for that, because now Renly is here. And it's like, if God didn't want those lives to have ever occurred, if he didn't intend for life to sometimes happen as a result of imperfect circumstances, he would not make it so, so I mean, I guess I'm just reiterating your point, but I agree with you 100%. I think it's incredible, and it boggles my mind that people don't see that, life as proof of his existence.
What you were saying, like God wills like all of these things into existence. Oh my gosh, Mary Kate, this has been such an awesome conversation. I have just loved chatting with you. Was there anything else that you wanted to just like add in before we close out? Or just thank you for having me. This was great. If people want to find out more about Feminine Vero, our website is femvero.org, femvero.org. And I think that's probably it. Awesome. Yeah. And I'm going to put that in the show notes. So you can just click on there and then also, Mary Kate has her own Instagram, so you can follow her and all of the ways to connect.
Exactly.
Oh man. Mary Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. If you have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, I love hearing from you guys. So please reach out via email or on Instagram. Links to those are in the show notes. And a quick shameless plug. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, I would love a rating and a review. I love reading those. They're so fun. Like I said, I love hearing from you guys. So I love hearing the impact that the podcast has had on you, your life, your marriage, etc. But those ratings and reviews help to spread the word. So I'd really appreciate that if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Until next time.